I joined the Labour Party in 1967. I was only 2 years old at the time, you appreciate. But in those days, political divides were quite sharp and profound. What actually caused me to join the Labour Party was the Vietnam War, where it just seemed to me outrageous that a small nation was being used as a proxy war for main powers, particularly America, and that just seemed wrong. And from that initial flirtation with social justice, shall we say, my interest developed, and I joined the party, and I've been a member ever since then. It's common knowledge that I was identified with the militant tendency for many years, right up until about 84, 85, never hidden that. It's just how it is. That did teach me a lot about discipline and political organization, and the importance of working hard for whatever movement it is that you believe in. Certainly, as I began by saying, political divides and the recognition and identification of political movements in those days was much clearer. If you like, the class forces were clearer. The trade unions clearly represented the working class people. They were sharper in their focus. In Wales, of course, it was predominated by the heavy industries and coal and steel, and therefore the balance of political and social forces was much clearer. Massive changes since then, and I've been there and I've seen it happen before me. Now, issues are not so clear. There is an enormous blurring at the edges about where people stand. Technology has moved on massively. That's affected the way people work, how they identify themselves in terms of classes. The constituency I represent, Caerphilly, traditionally viewed as a former heavy industry area, former mining area, and all that's true. But for most of the younger people growing up, and those up until about the age of 40, mining is just history. There's very little direct experience, and the same loyalties are not there. So the way in which we need to engage changes as time goes by. No perhaps surprise there. What we can see in very recent times, looking at the Scottish experience, and regardless of whether you wanted Scotland to vote for independence or not, and clearly I was in the no camp in that regard, what was, well, there we are, that's my view. What was crucial was the level of engagement that took place amongst people. And the role that social media had to play, and the way in which people's enthusiasm for a very important issue was developed. Now, we can't have constant referendums of that nature, clearly, but we've got coming up a general election, which will be very, very important for all the main political parties, and certainly for the people of this country. But what's accompanying it, and you mentioned the U word, I'll put it in full, UKIP, is an enormous feeling of negativity. Now, I don't often believe in the same things that John Major believed in, but I was impressed when he was interviewed on the Sunday Politics very recently, where he talked about the enormous goodwill that exists within the country in terms of Ebola, and issues in terms of volunteering and support and comic relief and the various charities and good causes that people will rally around and raise huge sums of money. That on the one hand, and then on the other hand, the exceptional negativity that UKIP survives on. I mean, it seems to be amazing that Carswell and Reckless, their two MPs, are regarded as some sort of radicals who are there to represent the People's Army, as they call it. Reckless, in his speech, even had the absolute cheek to raise the issue of the Chartists, that he was somehow of the same spirit, and the people on the move. Absolutely appalling how he thinks he can get away with something like that with his record in terms of Parliament. So on the one hand, we do have the issue of the negativity expressed by UKIP, the sort of rejection of what people see as conventional politics and politicians, and that does make it harder for us. The other side of that coin, and I certainly had a lot of involvement with this when I was the Minister for Communities and Tackling Poverty, and very often the scapegoats is the Islamic community within Britain and within Wales, and I particularly did a lot of work with the Islamic community in Cardiff and indeed other parts of Wales, but particularly in Cardiff, and the issue of radicalism. And there's no point in pretending that it's not there. It is a very, very serious issue, and in one sense also marks a complete rejection of what we might regard as democratic standards and the desire to work together for a democratic outcome and democratic progress. So how you tackle the issue on the one hand of the complete negativity, people like UKIP often then using people like the Islamic communities as scapegoats, and then on the other hand the complete rejection of the norms that we've grown up with by young people, particularly young men who are Muslims in terms of their religion. Those are issues that we have to face, and politics in that sense in Wales has to address those two edges to this particular problem. That enormous cynicism, if you like, from apathy and indeed then the search for a radical alternative in the form of Islamic radicalism. And those issues are there, and the issues that democratic parties have to seek to address, because we need to try and represent all people. Very often the issue of the European Union is raised in an exceptionally negative fashion. We know that UKIP, that is their main foundation for support, opposition to all that European Union means, therefore by extension internationalism more generally. The real problem for all progressives in this atmosphere is how you actually engage with people. Now, that's not easy. And it's a matter that certainly in my constituency and in constituencies up and down Wales is a huge concern. It's not just an issue of how you tackle the issues that people are faced with on a daily basis and the apathy that's out there. We've got a huge problem of people not registering as voters. Now, in my constituency, the official figures from the registration officers is that they've estimated that about 15 to 18% of people who are entitled to register to vote aren't. Now, I think that's an enormous problem for democracy. It also tends to be concentrated, it's not just across the board. In the more disadvantaged areas, the proportion who are not registering are much higher. And that means that they are disenfranchising themselves by not registering as voters. And that is a problem for all democratic institutions. If we don't have people being able to take part in democratic elections, then there's a huge problem, and that's only going to worsen the situation in terms of allowing in those who are more of extremist views. Now, on the one hand, we have the problem that we face that I've just tried to outline. In Wales, and here I would certainly share Plaid Cymru as being part of this. We want to govern on the principles of social justice. I was very pleased as the Minister to lead the Tackling Poverty Action Plan, which contained a number of issues in terms of how we deal with austerity, even when most of those levers were not in our hands, how we utilise the passported benefits, how we attempt to mitigate the worst effects of the welfare changes that the UK government is still bringing in and will continue to bring in if they win in the general election. And at the same time, how we seek to create jobs in very, very difficult economic situations. I'm very proud that when I was the Deputy Minister for Skills, I introduced and established the Jobs Growth Wales programme, which was really about providing not only expanded businesses, but opportunities for young people to get jobs, and that programme has now exceeded its targets. We have a very good apprenticeship programme, where the completion rate is now 86%, much higher than it is in England. We do certainly have problems in our health service and in education, but these are issues to be tackled. Many of them are historic. Not everybody realises in terms of the health service in Wales. In Wales, we are a net importer of retired people. Now that obviously has an impact on what the health service has to do in terms of coping with an ageing population. There are big issues that face us. There's local government reform. We're all familiar with the Williams Commission, but I firmly believe that if we get this right in terms of the delivery of all public services, not just local government, although that's the one that tends to be high up on the agenda, then we will deliver better services for the people of Wales, difficult though it may be. I was very proud to introduce the Future Generations Bill into the Assembly, a bill which I genuinely believe will provide for a stronger, more sustainable future for the generations that will come after us. We have the very successful Flying Start scheme, which will double the number to 36,000 of young people by the life of this Assembly, so that young people from the most disadvantaged families can get the best start that they can within life. We're doing considerable work to tackle digital exclusion. Superfast Cymru, together with things like Communities 2.0, will roll out across Wales, and we will be doing our very best to make sure that people in Wales have the opportunity to access high-quality digital technologies. And of course, very pleased that last week we're able to announce just over 1,100 jobs, good quality, well-paid jobs coming to Wales. So I mentioned that because in the context of social justice, we can not just look at the issue of how we engage with people, but what that government, what the governmental decisions are actually seeking to deliver, because I think the two do go together. If I just return towards the end of what I want to say, in terms of engagement, one of the things that the Scottish referendum showed us, that the move to bring votes down to people at age 16 was a success. Now, however those young people voted, the engagement was clear to see. When I was, I didn't get the vote until I was 21. Then it came down to 18. Society changes. I think it's absolutely right now that we look towards introducing votes at 16, and certainly the Welsh Government is supporting that aspect of the Wales Bill that the UK Government is considering in terms at least of any future vote on the devolution of income tax to Wales. I want to go further than that, and I'd like to see young people aged 16 right across the UK have the vote. I think it's important now. You know, what's the saying? No taxation without representation, and if young people can be taxed at age 16, if they can join the army, if they can fight for the country, if they can get married, then it's only right to me that they have the opportunities to vote. So I'm very pleased that Dame Rosemary Butler, the presiding officer, for example, is now having a full consultation on the support for votes at 16, and you know, we're committed to working with young people right across the Assembly, and all party leaders signed up to that theme. We've also got the issue of silk, of course, and the Wales Bill coming through Parliament, which I think will bring many changes to political and economic life in Wales that are largely for the good. Not every financial recommendation from Silk Part 1 is included within the Wales Bill, but I think there's a lot of them that there are. And I do certainly believe that the issue of a devolving income tax should not be there. There should not be a referendum until we've established fair funding for Wales. And whilst everyone tends to agree with that, I think the issues around Scotland have skewed it a little bit. As you know, the Scottish Government is very keen to keep Barnet because it's certainly to their advantage financially to do so, not to our advantage. But I don't think people out there are that worried about the formula. What we want is the right amount of money so that Wales can deliver the services that it needs effectively. Now, in terms of widening access, and I'll draw my remarks to a close. As you know, Labour in Wales is very keen to increase the number of women, for example, and indeed other underrepresented groups in public life in general. It was part of my responsibilities as the Minister for Communities and Tackling Poverty, and we were certainly making progress. But I think there are hard decisions to be made. I support the notion of all women shortlists in the party. I'm not everybody's favourite in that. It's sometimes a tough call to make. But I certainly believe that positive action is necessary if we're going to increase the numbers in Parliament. We've done very well in terms of the Assembly. When I came to the Assembly first in 2003, as did Jan, there were actually more female Labour AMs than male. And that was reflected within the Cabinet as well. The balance has slightly shifted, and now there's fewer than 50%. But you know, we're determined to try and do what we can to balance the books in terms of female representation. It's way out in terms of Parliament. That women representation, for example, is much poorer, and that has to be addressed. It's not easy, because it follows that if it's an all-women shortlist, men can't be on it. Of course it does. And men have been a very important part of my party and the Labour movement more generally. And it's not an easy thing to always accept. And there's very, very many capable younger men and women who want to take up those roles. I'll be standing down as the Caerphilly candidate at the next election. I'll be almost 68. And I feel it's time to hand over to someone who's younger. It'll be a matter from ICLP and the party itself as to whether that's a man or a woman. And we'll just have to see how that turns out. It's not for me, as the member standing down, to seek to influence that particular decision. So, look, I'm also very keen, and I would say this, wouldn't I, to work closely with the trade unions as well to ensure that we try to get the social mix of candidates better. I want to see more people from trade union working class backgrounds standing and being elected as Assembly members and indeed as members of Parliament. Nothing against lawyers, doctors, everyone has a role to play, but if you look at the overall balance, certainly in Parliament, there are nowhere near as many working people or from the working class backgrounds as there ought to be. And that's not a new thing. It's not a new thing. But I certainly want to see improvements within my lifetime, and I'll continue to be working for it. And I will remain active in politics even when I'm no longer an Assembly member. Let me just finish on 2 points. I'll return to UKIP. I remember, as many of you will hear, when the SDP formed out of Labour back in the early 80s and did enormous damage to Labour in terms of losing seats, far more damage than the militant tendency ever did, even though it was the militant tendency that tended to have the attention. That organisation, if they hadn't merged with the Liberals to form the Lib Dems, would probably just not exist at all now. So I'm not necessarily that pessimistic or alarmed longer term about UKIP, but they can do damage. There's no doubt about that. And one of the issues when on the doorstep I meet people say, oh, we're going to support UKIP, and say, well, what's their policy on education? And I'm invariably looked at as if I've gone off, you know, because no one knows. They flip-flop all the time. At one point, they were in favour of selling off the NHS and making everybody have to take out private medical insurance. Now they've realised that is not popular on the doorstep, so now they're defenders of the NHS. Even after Reckless was just elected, he made remarks which are now being disowned by Farage about sending back or repatriating European citizens, regardless of what they may be doing in this country. So it's they're a poor lot, but that doesn't mean that they're not capable of winning elections by default. And it's very important that that threat is taken. The very, very last point is this. Look, I've still got a lot of hope for people in Wales, because I know that whilst all this negativity is still going on and this disengagement with politics, there's an awful lot of good work being done out there. I've met people engaged with credit unions, a whole range of volunteers, voluntary groups and charities. There is enormous goodwill for helping people out there, especially in very, very difficult economic times like this. The issue for democratic politicians is how you harness that energy in a positive political direction. Thank you very much.